Hello, everybody. How are you? I hope you're doing very well today, and I'm doing very well too. In fact, I'm doing a lot better now that I've gotten this surgery out of my way. I'm so glad because I had this kind of a medium-sized stone trapped inside of this gland over here, and I had been walking around here with that for the last decade. And so I was finally able to get it removed a couple of weeks ago. And I'm so glad that that's behind me now. And I'm healing up and I'm feeling a lot better. Didn't really have any pain behind it, so I consider myself very fortunate. Nevertheless, I'm so glad to be back on here with you. I tell you, I miss it when I can't come on, or don't have time, or I got other things to do. And so I'm glad to be back with you. And I want to welcome you to another episode of TJ's Topics. And of course, you know who I am. I'm TJ. And I'm certainly glad to be with you once again. And by the time you see this episode, we will have just celebrated Father's Day. And we're in the midst of this Juneteenth weekend. I tell you, all of this converged right together. Personally, I had another celebration in my family as well. My auntie, we celebrated her 70th birthday, and we celebrated her birthday along with another relative who turned 68. And so that was good. Then, of course, Father's Day and Juneteenth. So all this stuff has converged together throughout this whole weekend, and we've really had a good time. I tell you, and Lord knows I wouldn't have wanted to be laying up in a hospital or at home down and out while all this was going on, because I would have hated to miss out on all that. So glad to be doing good. But let me cut to the chase. I definitely want to come on today because I got this topic that I would like to discuss for just a little while, and it's one that I really didn't want to deal with. I've been wrestling with it for probably about the last 6 months because I started thinking about it at the early part of this year, but I was reluctant to even tackle this issue because, when it comes to stuff like this, especially when you're dealing with a whole bunch of religious folk and, these churchgoers and stuff like that, a lot of times if you try to talk to them about certain things, it's like you're talking to yourself almost. It goes in one ear and out the other. And a lot of times they don't seem to comprehend. A lot of these churchgoers, you try to discuss things with them about whatever it is, but for some reason or another, it's like it goes over their head. So that's one reason why I don't even bother to try to discuss certain things with them, because for one thing, they don't have a license in these matters. They don't have a professional license or degree or anything a lot of times. So therefore, they don't really know what to say. They don't know how to help you. And most times they can't help you. If anything, all they want to do is get in your business and have something to talk about. So it's best to it's best not to even run to them with anything very personal, because all they're gonna do is make you out to be the bad guy or the bad girl. And deep in your heart that you're not. So, but anyway, what I want to talk about is the real meaning of the word fornication. That's what I came to discuss. Now, we have all heard this word many times, especially coming from the pulpit, you know. Oh, and they always want to piggyback on what the Apostle Paul said and stuff. And see, Paul is the one who messed us all up. I mean, if you think about it, the majority of what Paul said was based on his own opinions and his own interpretation of scripture. It wasn't necessarily what God said or anything like that. And if you read along a little further, he'll tell you that that most of what he said wasn't coming from the Lord, but instead it was based on how he felt about certain things. And mind you, he was addressing the people who were around at that particular time. In other words, during his lifetime. He wasn't talking to those of us who are alive in the 21st century, in the year 2023. He was talking to folks who lived hundreds of years ago. I'm talking about, probably about 2,000 years ago, maybe, something like that. I mean, that's how long ago that Paul's words, were spoken. And think about this. Much of what we have read in the Bible is based on allegory, it's based on mysticism and parables that Christ taught. Of course, the allegory, basically a lot of scripture that we read, here in America, people tend to take the Bible literally. And I know because for the majority of my life, I took it literally. I believed everything it said because I thought that what it said was based on something literal. But I found out later on that it wasn't meant to be taken literally because the writers were penning these words based on what they felt and what they saw and what they believed and what they thought God may have said to them. But we don't have any way to verify whether it was God speaking to them or whether it was just something that they thought themselves, just like the Apostle Paul, because he tells you that it was his opinion. And so I just want to come on here for a few minutes to share with you some things regarding the word fornication, because this word has been used time and time again to scare the hell out of people. And I know for a fact it scared me half to death. When I was a teenager, at age 14, around about 13 or 14 years old, and in church, the pastor whose ministry I was under at that time, he always would get up there preaching about fornication, talking about if people out here fornicating, they're going to go to hell and all that kind of stuff, and talking about, yes, a lot of y'all in the church, y'all shacking up and y'all fornicating and you're committing adultery and all that kind of stuff. And, it was just so much that was said that came out that pulpit every Sunday. And as a teenager, that really bothered me. And I was somewhat fearful of what he was saying, especially when he got to the hell part. I mean, it was ridiculous. However, I am so thankful that with the passage of time, and with the unveiling of more knowledge and information, and with the advent of resources, such as the internet, because remember now, I lived the majority of my life without the internet. I'm a part of the last generation of children who grew up without the internet. So to now have the internet and where I can get on Google and stuff like that and tap into other resources where I can learn what certain words mean versus, you know, what we were taught way back. I mean, it's a blessing. I consider it a huge blessing. And I would encourage all of you out there to do your own research as well and find out exactly what these words mean. Because we know what the church has told us all these years, but it would behoove us to do our own research and find out exactly what these words mean for ourselves. So that way, anytime a preacher gets up there or whoever gets up there and try to tell folks something, well, you don't have to buy into it because you already know for yourself exactly what it means. Matter of fact, you'll know a lot better than them because unlike them, you have done research and they haven't. So here we go, talking about the real meaning of the word fornication. Now, first of all, we know that according to the church, fornication is defined as premarital sex. That's what they say it means. But is that the real meaning of the word fornication? Well, that's the question I have for you. What is fornication? Does it mean two unmarried people who, sleep together, who fool around or whatever, without signing on the dotted line, going to the courthouse, getting a marriage license? Two people who have not stood up in front of the pastor or the justice of the peace and exchanged wedding vows, putting rings on each other's fingers, having bridesmaids and best man and the groomsmen and the ring bearer and flower girl. Is that what a marriage is? Or have we been duped? I lean toward the latter. And I'm going to tell you why. Fornication, and the root word is porneia, comes from the word porneia, which basically means pornography. That's where you get the word pornography from. Fornication does not refer to sex before marriage. It refers to unlawful sexual conduct, such as prostitution, sex rituals, or anything along those lines. Truth be told, once you've had a sexual encounter with someone, in essence, there is a bond that develops between the two of you. A bond that will most likely never be broken, regardless of whether the two of you ever copulate again. That's basically what fornication is, in terms of, fornication is not what we've been taught. But here is what fornication leans towards. It's more along the lines of idolatry, worshiping pagan idols, conducting these god-awful rituals. That's what fornication is. It's not two people, two unmarried folk, now not committed, in a relationship, not married to anybody, but two people who like each other or love each other, and they get together. Now, the church will call that fornication, but that's not the true definition of fornication. But see, we've been led to believe that. and see, they got it wrong. I mean, the church has gotten a lot of stuff wrong over the years, but they don't want to own up to it, because if they start to realize where they've made mistakes and own up to their mistakes, see, what that's going to do is that's going to make them start to look at God some kind of way. That they feel like if they own up to their errors over time, then that'll make God out to be a liar. In other words, God is not who he says he is, and he makes mistakes. And they feel like they are the closest thing to God. Church folk do. And that's the reason why they hold the pastor, and these bishops and things like that to such a high esteem, because they feel like he has the closest connection to God, more so than anybody else in the church. But I tell you, it's something to think about. And when you start doing research, you'll learn that, nope, there's much more to it than what they're telling you. But they're not going to tell you the truth, because if you ever learn the truth, 9 times out of 10, you may not go back up in there. And see, they need you there because they need that money. Remember, it's all about that dollar. That's what it's all about. The word fornication derives from the root word fornix, which is spelled Fornix, which is simply an archway above an opening or an entrance. It is usually at or near these spots, the fornix, where people stand and welcome those who are coming in for an event or service or whatever, that's about to take place. That's what a fornix is. It's very simple. I mean, it's simply an archway above a door, right there at the entrance where you walk in. And we usually see these archways above the doors in churches and cathedrals. A lot of historic colleges and universities have them, those that were built way back, and also you'll find fornixes in European structures. European architecture may consist of a lot of fornixes in their buildings, whatever kind of building it is. And so that's what a fornix is, and that's where the word fornication came from. But now, how did it get in the Bible? See, that's what we need to find out. Now, you find a lot of it in the book of 1 Corinthians. I think it's chapter, I want to say, what was it, chapter 7, somewhere along in there. It's in 1 Corinthians, where it talks about how they performed all of these sex rituals in the church of Corinth. The Corinthians worshiped the god Aphrodite, which was the sex goddess, and that's where you get the word aphrodisiac, which means to entice one in a sexual manner, to turn on sexually. That's what an aphrodisiac is. And they worshiped her, Aphrodite. And there were other pagan gods and goddesses that they worshiped as well in the church of Corinth. And in the church of Corinth, they had to figure out how they could go about luring more people into the temple, namely men. Because remember, in the Bible days, and way back, even before the Bible was compiled into a book, only men were allowed to have any form of wealth. The women were not allowed to have any wealth or, own property. And see, the biggest reason why women weren't allowed to own property in those days is because they themselves were considered property. by the men who had them. You know, they may have been their husbands or their fathers or what have you. They were deemed nothing more than a piece of furniture or appliance, electronic device. That's what women were back in the Bible days. And even before there was a such book as a Bible, women were considered second-class citizens. And because of that, they didn't have a right to anything. The only thing that women were used for was to bring about pleasure to the men whose lives they were part of. You know, whether it was their husbands or their I guess I should say pimp. Remember now, there is nothing new under the sun. In Ecclesiastes, it tells us the thing that hath been is the thing that shall be. See, history repeats itself. So people want to come down on those who watch pornography and stuff like that. And they want to come down on people who have all these different types of sexual relationships and things. But what you got to remember is none of this is new. None of this has just started happening. These things have been going on for centuries. The only difference between then and now is that whereas they didn't have a means to record their different acts at that time, now we do, thanks to the advent of video cameras. And we have television, we have satellite, and of course we have DVDs, and before that we had VCRs and all that, you know, videotapes and things, you know, I mean, all that stuff. Because you used to go to Blockbuster and rent those pornographic videos. They had porn in Blockbuster. Now, of course, I didn't rent it, but but it was available for anybody who wanted to. And so basically, that's what went on in the Corinthian church. You know, they practiced sex worship, you know, all types of sex acts alone in the pulpit, all around the altar. And so what they did was they had to figure out how to get more people into the church, particularly the men, since it was the men who had the money. And remember, it's all about that dollar. And the men were the ones who had the money to bring into the church, you know, to generate more revenue for them. So what they did was they put ladies outside the door, right underneath the fornix, which is the archway of the door. And they were scantily dressed. You know, they had their boobs out, and they had their legs out, and their booty out, and everything. They might have been dancing and, you know, whatever they were doing in order to entice the men who were walking by or riding by to come in and see what was going on. See, basically, the church of Corinth, you know, the Corinthian church, was a combination of a brothel, which is a place where you go and hook up with prostitutes and what have you. One of those old sleazy motels, you know, where you might take a prostitute or some old slutty type woman to, you know, to knock off right quick and go on about your business. Or you also have strip clubs. And see, all that went on in the Corinthian church as well. So the church of Corinth was a brothel, a sleazy motel, and a strip club, all wrapped up into one. And in order for them to generate more revenue for the church, they had to have a way, you know, of getting more people to come in, especially men, because they already had enough women. You know, even today, churches are full of women, But you don't have that many men in church because men know game when they see it. And you can't get over on a man too quick unless he's weak-minded and just simply does not comprehend that well. But most of the time, men know game because we have played these games before. Therefore, there's no getting over on us. See, whereas men view things from a logical perspective, women tend to view things from an emotional perspective. You know, women make decisions based on how they feel, but men make decisions based on how it looks. And so that's the difference. And so that's the reason why they were mainly trying to go after the men in the street and lure them into the church because they were the ones who could bring more revenue into the church. And so if it meant putting these sexy ladies out there with these little, this lingerie, looking like prostitutes or just half naked, basically, then by all means, they did it. And apparently it worked because the men did go up in the church. And I'm sure a lot of them probably had sex with a lot of the women on the altar. And of course, since it was a church that idolized and basically worshiped any form of sex. I mean, any kind of sex you wanted. I don't care what it was. It could be heterosexual sex or homosexual. You could be with the same gender if you wanted to. It didn't make any difference. Sex was sex. And all of it went down in the Corinthian church. And so that's what the Apostle Paul was addressing. But when it comes to fornication, well, see, that's where the word came from. The fornix. That archway above the door or vaulted ceilings, like what we typically see in a lot of cathedrals. Even a lot of homes have vaulted ceilings. And that's what happened. But get this. We, as human beings, also have fornixes inside of us. Now, a man only has one fornix, and that is the fornix in the brain. Of course, men and women have that. And the fornix is a white matter bundle located in the mesial aspect of the cerebral hemisphere, which connects various nodes of a limbic circuitry and is believed to play a key role in cognitive and episodic memory recall. But now, the ladies have both the fornix in the brain and the fornix in their uterus. It's called the uterine fornix, or in Latin term, fornix uteri. And it's the anterior or front and the posterior, which is the back, recesses into which the upper vagina is divided. These vault-like recesses are formed by protrusion of the cervix into the vagina. And so women have that. And of course, we've already discussed the fornix in architecture. We see it all over the place, in this country. And if you ever travel to Europe, you'll definitely see a lot of it, fornix in cathedrals and other buildings. May see it in theaters and what have you. All kinds of architecture that you'll find fornix. So that's where the word fornication comes from. But that does not mean premarital sex. Because if you go back in Old Testament and do your research, you'll see where in the scriptures it actually indicates that anytime a man lays with a woman, who is unmarried and not engaged to be married, that once he has been with her, basically, he has made her his wife. He has to therefore be responsible for her and her well-being. But now, what about circumstances surrounding rape? Now, see, that's a problem right there, because you got a lot of ladies out here who've been raped by men. And some of them have even had babies by their rapists, which is a whole nother issue altogether. Now, does that deem to be appropriate? I would think not. But remember, everything that we've been taught with regards to religion over the years, a lot of it was based on stories that came from other sources and that was written by people who lived way before there was even thought of a Bible ever coming into being. So that's why it's so important that we learn to do our own research. And I tell you, if I had the knowledge back then that I have now, I believe life may have turned out a little different for me, but I just didn't have that knowledge back then. Well, we didn't have the resources back then either. Like I said, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have social media. None of that stuff existed during the time when I was growing up. We didn't get that. That didn't come along until much later. So anyway, that's what I want to talk about today. The real meaning of the word fornication. And I hope that all of you learned something. And feel free to share it with whoever you like. But I definitely encourage you to do research, because it's very important. That way you don't have to worry about being lost and not having any knowledge, because you have knowledge for yourself, and that'll be much better. Thank you so much for tuning in to me. And thank you for watching this episode of TJ's Topics. I really do appreciate it. And please like and comment, subscribe to my channel if you will. And like I said, you can share it if you want to. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience as well, because like I said, it's been so much going on, and we're coming to the end of the first half of 2023, getting ready to enter into the second half very soon. So we'll see what happens. This is Taryn Jerome Harris, reminding you that every round goes higher and higher. And I definitely look forward to seeing you again on the next go round. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.